The elevator music in the Meridian Tower barely masked the soft screech of industrial-grade cleaning wheels against marble. Maya Rodriguez pushed her cart down the 47th floor hallway, the scent of lemon disinfectant mixing with the metallic tang of high-altitude air conditioning. At 2:17 a.m., the building belonged to the night shift janitors, security guards, and the occasional workaholic executive who'd forgotten that human beings weren't designed to live in fluorescent caves. She paused outside conference room B, peering through the glass walls at the scattered papers and abandoned coffee cups. The detritus of another merger meeting, another acquisition that would reshape lives while the decision-makers slept soundly in their Tribeca penthouses. Maya had cleaned these rooms for 3 years, long enough to read the patterns in the chaos, long enough to know that tomorrow's headlines were written in tonight's coffee stains. The elevator chimed behind her. Maya didn't turn. Night cleaning protocol demanded invisibility, the art of being present but unseen. Footsteps echoed against the polished floor's expensive leather soles that spoke of custom Italian shoes and quarterly bonuses that exceeded her annual salary. "Excusez-moi, madame." The voice carried the refined accent of Swiss banking, urgent but controlled. "Où est la salle de conférence principale?" Maya glanced up from her spray bottle. The man before her wore a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost more than her car. His silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. His eyes darted nervously between her face and the elevator doors as if expecting pursuit. She switched effortlessly to French, her grandmother's Haitian roots, lending authenticity to her pronunciation. "La salle de conférence principale est au bout du couloir, monsieur, mais elle est fermée à 7 heures. The man's eyebrows shot up genuine surprise, replacing his earlier urgency. "Vous parlez français?" "Oui, et espagnol, portuguese, deutsch, italiano, al-arabia, jongwin." "Ruski yazik, Hindi, and if you're feeling particularly adventurous, a bit of Swahili." Maya's smile was warm but professional. "The main conference room is locked, but conference room B is available if you need privacy." The elevator dinged again. 3 men in identical black suits stepped out, their movements synchronized with the precision of federal training. The Swiss banker's face went pale. "Merci," he whispered, pressing a USB drive into Maya's palm. "Si quelqu'un demande, vous ne m'avez jamais vu." He disappeared into conference room B, leaving Maya holding what felt like a digital grenade. The 3 men approached with purpose, their eyes scanning every surface, every shadow. "Evening, ma'am." The lead agent flashed a badge too quickly to read. "Have you seen anyone unusual on this floor tonight?" Maya continued wiping down the glass partition, her movements steady and unremarkable. "Define unusual. This building sees a lot of strange people after midnight. Foreign national, older gentleman, expensive suit." She paused as if considering. "I've seen 3 expensive suits in the last hour, you gentlemen and whoever's been bleeding coffee all over conference room A." She gestured toward the opposite end of the hall. "Though I suppose technically you're all foreign nationals to someone." The agents exchanged glances. One spoke into his collar microphone while the others began a methodical search of the floor. Maya watched them through her peripheral vision, noting their search patterns, their blind spots, the way they moved like hunters who'd lost the scent. 20 minutes later, they were gone. The Swiss banker emerged from conference room B. His earlier panic replaced by curious assessment. "You speak 9 languages," he said, not a question. 10 if you count sarcasm as its own dialect. He almost smiled. "And you chose to clean buildings." "I chose to eat regularly and pay rent on time. Turns out the global economy has very specific opinions about where polyglots belong, and it's rarely in the corner office." The banker studied her with the intensity of someone accustomed to evaluating assets. "What if I told you that USB drive contains information that could bring down 3 major banks, expose a human trafficking ring, and potentially prevent a war in Eastern Europe?" Maya glanced at the drive in her palm, then back at his face. "I'd say that sounds like someone else's problem. I've got 12 more floors to clean before sunrise." And what if I told you that your current employer, Meridian Financial Group, is one of those 3 banks? That stopped her. Maya set down her spray bottle, her cleaning cart suddenly feeling like a prop in someone else's play. I'd say you better start talking fast because those federal agents didn't look like they were planning to discuss this over coffee and croissants. The banker extended his hand. Dr. Heinrich Volkov, former Director of International Compliance at Zurich International Bank, and you are someone who speaks 10 languages, recognizes federal agents on site, and just became the most important person in this building. Maya shook his hand, feeling the weight of the USB drive and the heavier weight of choice. Maya Rodriguez, night janitor, and apparently as of 2 minutes ago, international person of interest. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out below them like a circuit board. Millions of lights marking millions of lives that would be affected by whatever truth was stored on that tiny device. Maya had spent 3 years cleaning up other people's messes in these towers of power. Now, for the first time, she was holding the mop. In conference room B, with Manhattan glittering 47 floors below, and the scent of industrial lemons still hanging in the air. Maya Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. Not because she was brave, not because she was heroic, but because she was tired of being invisible while the world burned around her. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone assumes doesn't matter. The Swiss banker was still talking, his voice urgent and low, but Maya was no longer listening to his words. She was reading his face, his posture, the way his fingers trembled despite his controlled voice. 3 years of night shifts had taught her to recognize fear, and Dr. Heinrich Volkov was terrified. The files on that drive, he continued, they document everything. Shell companies in Panama, arms deals through Singapore, money flowing from Geneva to warlords in 3 different conflicts, but the trafficking, that's what they'll kill for. Maya pocketed the USB drive, her movement casual but deliberate. You said Meridian was involved. Your CEO, Marcus Thornfield, he's not just complicit, he's orchestrating. The quarterly reports you probably see scattered around these conference rooms, they're fiction. The real money flows through accounts your cleaning lady badge could never access. The irony wasn't lost on her. Maya pulled out her phone fingers, moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, she'd accessed the building's maintenance database, then pivoted through a security vulnerability she'd discovered months ago, but never exploited. Accounts like these. She turned the screen toward Volkov, displaying a series of financial records that made his eyes widen. How did you? You'd be surprised what people leave unlocked when they think the help can't read. Maya scrolled through transfers, account numbers, dates that aligned perfectly with news reports she remembered from late-night television. This transaction here, February 15th, $47 million to a company called Desert Rose Holdings. That was 3 days before the arms embargo on Yemen was lifted. Volkov stared at her phone, then at her face. You've been watching, learning. I've been cleaning, but unlike most people, I read what I clean up. A soft chime echoed through the hallway. The elevator was rising again. Maya glanced at the floor indicator, 34, 35, 36. Moving fast, no stops. Time to go, she said, already moving toward the service corridor. This building has 14 different exits, but only 3 that don't have cameras positioned to capture faces. You know the camera positions. I know everything about this building. I've been invisible here for 3 years. Maya led him toward a maintenance door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The question is, what exactly do you want me to do with your digital confession? Volkov hesitated. I hoped, someone would know how to make this public, the right journalists, the right authorities. Maya paused with her hand on the door handle. Dr. Volkov, I clean toilets for a living. My emergency contact list consists of my grandmother in Queens and a bodega owner who lets me buy coffee on credit. I'm not exactly connected to the Washington Post, but you speak 10 languages, you understand financial systems, you can access secure databases. I can also disappear. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. I can forget I saw you delete those financial records from my phone and go back to being invisible, because that's what smart people do when they stumble into other people's wars. The elevator reached the 47th floor. Doors opened with a soft whisper. Volkov looked at her with something between desperation and understanding. But you won't. Why do you say that? Because if you were the kind of person who could walk away, you would have done it the moment I handed you that drive. Maya listened to the footsteps in the hallway, counted voices, estimated how long they had before this conversation became academic. The files on this drive, they're not just evidence of crimes, they're evidence of specific crimes against specific people. Real names, real faces. Yes, children. Volkov's silence was answer enough. Maya opened the maintenance door. The service corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit and lined with pipes that carried the building's mechanical heartbeat. Then I guess we have work to do. As they moved through the hidden arteries of the Meridian Tower, Maya's mind was already racing ahead. She thought about the Swiss accounts. She'd glimpsed the pattern of transfers, the way money moved like water, finding the path of least resistance. But mostly she thought about the difference between being invisible by choice and being invisible because the world refused to see you. Behind them, voices echoed in conference room B. Someone was shouting orders. Someone else was making phone calls. The machine was starting to move gears, clicking into place, resources being deployed. But for the first time in 3 years, Maya Rodriguez was no longer just cleaning up other people's messes. She was about to make one of her own. The basement of the Meridian Tower hummed with the mechanical symphony of a building that never slept. Maya led Volkov through a maze of steam pipes and electrical conduits, her keycard opening doors that most employees didn't know existed. The USB drive felt warm in her pocket, as if the data itself was generating heat. "There's a 24-hour internet cafe 6 blocks north," she said, checking her phone for the time. "Owner's name is Chen. He asks no questions, and his surveillance cameras haven't worked since 2019. You seem to know a lot about avoiding surveillance. You seem surprised that someone who's been systematically ignored by society might have learned how to navigate its blind spots." They emerged through a loading dock into an alley that smelled of rain and rotting vegetables. The city's nocturnal ecosystem was in full swing, delivery trucks rumbling past homeless encampments, stirring to life early morning commuters who worked the kinds of jobs that started before sunrise. Maya pulled out a second phone, a battered Android she'd kept for emergencies. "Before we go any further, Dr. Volkov, I need to understand something. You worked for Zurich International for what, 15 years? 70. Made good money, lived well, had a corner office with a view of Lake Zurich. Yes. So what changed? What made you decide to throw away everything you'd built?" Volkov was quiet for several blocks. Maya didn't push. She'd learned that silence was often the most effective interrogation technique. People's need to fill empty air usually did the work for you. "Her name was Anya," he finally said. 14 years old, from a village outside Lviv. The traffickers promised her family she'd work as a house cleaner in Switzerland, send money home. Instead, he stopped walking. Instead, she ended up in a brothel in Geneva that was financed through one of our shell companies. When she tried to escape, they killed her. Maya waited. The police report crossed my desk as part of a routine compliance review. "Just another dead prostitute," they said. But I recognized the address, recognized the account numbers. I started digging. Volkov pulled out his own phone, showing Maya a photo, a girl with dark eyes and a tentative smile wearing what looked like her best dress. "She looked like my daughter did at 14. "Where's your daughter now?" "Medical school in Vienna. She doesn't know what her father really did for a living." Maya studied the photo, then handed the phone back. "The cafe is 2 more blocks. While we walk, tell me about the others." "What others?" "Dr. Volkov, you didn't risk everything for one girl, however tragic. You said trafficking, ring plural. How many others?" The numbers, when they came, were delivered in the flat monotone of someone reading a casualty report. 43 confirmed victims across 6 countries, ages ranging from 12 to 19. money flowing through Meridian Financial Group, Zurich International, and Deutsche Handelbank, in amounts that would have funded small countries. But it was the corporate structure that made Maya's blood run cold. The trafficking operation wasn't a side business, it was integrated into the bank's operations at the highest levels. Board meetings where human cargo was discussed alongside currency futures. Quarterly projections that included revenue streams from forced labor. "Your CEO, Marcus Thornfield," Volkov said as they approached the internet cafe. "He didn't just approve these transactions, he designed the system." Maya stopped walking. Through 3 years of late-night cleaning, she'd built a mental map of Meridian's corporate hierarchy. Marcus Thornfield was the golden boy who'd transformed a regional investment firm into a global powerhouse. Fortune 500 covers charity galas, a wife who chaired 3 different humanitarian foundations. How long has this been operational? The trafficking network at least 8 years. But the underlying structure, the shell companies and hidden accounts, that goes back to Meridian's founding. Maya pulled out her phone again, accessing files she'd photographed during late-night cleaning sessions. These board meeting minutes from 2019, the ones discussing diversified human resource allocation. Euphemisms, always euphemisms. The internet cafe was exactly as Maya remembered: fluorescent lighting, mismatched chairs, the smell of instant coffee and electronic components. Chen looked up from behind bulletproof glass, nodded at Maya, and buzzed them through to a private booth in the back. 1 hour minimum, no questions, he said in accented English, then switched to Mandarin. 需要什么帮助吗？谢谢陈先生，我们只需要网络。Maya replied, then added quietly, 如果有人来找我们，我们不在这里. Chen's expression didn't change, but he nodded once. In the booth, Maya plugged in the USB drive and waited for the files to load. What appeared on the screen made her stomach turn. Bank records were one thing, numbers on a page, abstract and clinical. But Volkov had also collected photographs, shipping manifests, communications between handlers and clients. Jesus Christ, Maya whispered, scrolling through a folder labeled Inventory Management. It gets worse, Volkov said quietly. The buyers aren't just individuals. Some of these purchases are being made by corporations, government contractors, diplomatic missions. Maya's phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. Maya Rodriguez. Who's asking? Agent Jennifer Walsh, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk. Maya looked at Volkov, who had gone pale. About what? About Dr. Heinrich Volkov, about information you may have come into possession of, and about the fact that your cell phone has been pinging towers across Manhattan for the last 2 hours in a pattern that suggests you're trying to avoid surveillance. I'm working, night shift. Ms. Rodriguez, we know you're not at the Meridian building. We know you left through the loading dock with Dr. Volkov at 3:47 a.m. And we know that in approximately 6 minutes a tactical team is going to breach whatever location you think is keeping you safe. Maya killed the call, ejected the USB drive, and grabbed Volkov's arm. Time to go. But the files are worthless if we're dead or in federal custody. They left through the cafe's rear exit, Maya leaving $200 on Chen's counter, more money than she made in 2 days. But Chen had earned it by not seeing them. The alley behind the cafe connected to a network of delivery routes and emergency exits that Maya had memorized during her months of unemployment, when knowing every place to hide or find shelter had been a matter of survival. The FBI, Volkov said as they moved through the urban maze. They're supposed to be investigating this. Are they? Or are they containing it? 2 blocks away, Maya heard the distinctive sound of tactical vehicles surrounding the internet cafe. Through her emergency phone, she accessed a police scanner app and listened to the radio chatter. Federal operation, multiple agencies, search warrant for electronic devices. Dr. Volkov, she said, pulling him into the recessed doorway of a closed bodega. When you first approached me tonight, you said you hoped to find someone who would know how to make this public, the right journalists, the right authorities. Yes. What made you think a night janitor would have those connections? Volkov looked at her with an expression that was part confusion, part dawning realization. "You're not just a night janitor." "No," Maya said, watching federal vehicles position themselves at both ends of the street. "I'm not." She pulled out her primary phone and scrolled through a contact list that included numbers in Geneva, Sao Paulo, London, and Hong Kong. Journalists, activists, human rights lawyers, and others who worked in the shadows where official channels failed. "My name is Maya Rodriguez," she said into the phone, speaking Portuguese to someone in Brazil. "I need you to patch me through to Elena Santos at The Guardian. Tell her the Meridian story just became international." As she made the call, Maya realized that her 3 years of invisibility hadn't been hiding, they had been preparation. Every late-night shift, every overheard conversation, every photographed document had been building toward this moment. The question was no longer whether she could expose the truth. The question was whether she could survive long enough to do it. Elena Santos answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with the alertness of someone accustomed to receiving urgent calls at 4:30 a.m. London time. "Maya Rodriguez," she said without preamble. "I was wondering when you'd resurface. You know who I am. Former investigative journalist for Telemundo, specialized in financial crimes and human trafficking. Disappeared from the field 3 years ago after your expose on pharmaceutical companies got a little too close to some very powerful people. What I don't know is why you've been scrubbing floors in Manhattan when you should be breaking stories." Maya glanced at Volkov, who was listening intently despite not understanding the English conversation. "Because sometimes the best way to get inside a system is to become invisible to it. And now I have a Swiss banking executive, a USB drive full of evidence, and approximately 15 minutes before federal agents track our location through cell tower triangulation. Send me what you have." Maya connected the USB drive to her phone and began uploading files while simultaneously moving through the early morning Manhattan streets. Her mental map of the city included not just the obvious routes, but the spaces between construction sites. Subway access tunnels, the gap between buildings where utilities ran. "Elena, this isn't just money laundering. The trafficking operation is integrated into the corporate structure of 3 major international banks. They're not facilitating crimes, they are the crime. Who else knows? That's the problem. The FBI is hunting us, but I can't tell if they're investigating the banks or protecting them. Upload everything to the secure server. I'll coordinate with our financial crimes team and the documentary unit. We can have initial verification within 6 hours and a story ready within 12. 6 hours might be too long." Maya ended the call and turned to Volkov. "How many other people have copies of these files? I kept everything centralized, too dangerous to distribute. So if something happens to us, the evidence dies with us." Maya's emergency phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Building surveillance shows you leaving with foreign national. Turn yourself in for questioning. This is your only warning. Agent Walsh." "Dr. Volkov, I need to ask you something important. When you decided to steal these files, did you have an exit strategy? I hope to get the information to journalists and then disappear. New identity, South America, somewhere beyond extradition reach." And now, Volkov looked at her with something approaching respect. "Now I realize I'm traveling with someone who's far more qualified to handle this situation than I am." Maya led him down into the subway system, not to catch a train, but to access the maintenance tunnels that ran parallel to the tracks. Her keycard from the Meridian building worked on more doors than most people realized. The company had contracts with city infrastructure projects that created unexpected access points. "The trafficking network," she said as they moved through tunnels that smelled of metal and electricity. "It's not just about moving people. They're using the victims for labor in legitimate businesses." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been cleaning those businesses for 3 years. The overnight shifts, the workers who don't speak English, the ones who sleep in storage rooms and never seem to leave the building." Maya's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I thought they were just undocumented immigrants trying to survive. I didn't realize they were prisoners." They emerged through a maintenance exit into the financial district where glass towers reflected the pre-dawn sky like mirrors of ice. Maya's phone showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers and a single text from Elena Santos. Files received. Holy shit. We have a problem, Maya said, checking her news feeds. Zurich International just announced that Dr. Heinrich Volkov has been terminated for gross misconduct and that he stole proprietary information. They're trying to discredit the evidence. No, Maya said, reading the statement more carefully. They're trying to discredit you. The statement says you've been under investigation for financial improprieties and may have fabricated documents to cover your own crimes. Volkov's face went white. That's impossible. I have bank records, communication logs, timestamps, all of which can be called into question if you're positioned as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. Maya's phone rang. Agent Walsh again. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to be very clear with you. The man you're helping is not who you think he is. I'm listening. Heinrich Volkov has been embezzling money from client accounts for over 2 years. The files he gave you, they're fabricated evidence designed to shift blame away from his own crimes. And the photographs. A pause. What photographs? The images of victims shipping manifest client communications. Are you telling me Dr. Volkov fabricated all of that as well? Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Rodriguez, I think there may be some confusion about what information you believe you have access to. Maya ended the call and looked at Volkov. They don't know about the photographs. What does that mean? It means the FBI has been briefed on the financial documents but not the trafficking evidence. Someone's controlling the information flow. As if on cue, Maya's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Coffee shop on 42nd and Lex. Come alone. You have something that belongs to me. M. Thornfield. Marcus Thornfield, the CEO of Meridian Financial Group. Maya had cleaned his office dozens of times, had seen him in person exactly twice, had read his communications and financial records without him ever knowing she existed. Now he was inviting her to coffee. Dr. Volkov, she said quietly. How much do you know about Maya Rodriguez, the investigative journalist, versus Maya Rodriguez, the night janitor? I assume they were the same person. They are. But Maya Rodriguez, the graduate student in computational linguistics. Maya Rodriguez, the former NSA contractor, and Maya Rodriguez, the person who spent 2 years embedded in financial crimes networks. Those are also the same person. Volkov stared at her. You're not just a journalist. No, I'm not just a journalist. Maya checked her phone one more time. Elena Santos had sent a secure message. Story going live in 30 minutes. 3 newspapers, 2 television networks, 1 documentary release. International coordination complete. The evidence is secure, Maya told Volkov. Whatever happens next, the truth is going public. And Thornfield, Maya looked toward the financial district where the Meridian Tower rose like a steel and glass monument to the system she'd spent 3 years learning to navigate. I think it's time I had a conversation with my former employer. That's incredibly dangerous. Dr. Volkov, Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years walking the line between exposure and invisibility. I've been in danger since the moment I realized what I was cleaning up in those conference rooms. The only thing that's changed is that now I'm not hiding anymore. As dawn broke over Manhattan, casting long shadows between the towers of power, Maya Rodriguez walked toward a meeting that would determine whether 3 years of careful observation and strategic invisibility would be enough to bring down a system that had been operating in plain sight. Behind her, Dr. Heinrich Volkov followed, still not entirely sure who he was walking with, but beginning to understand that he had found exactly the right person to carry the burden he'd been unable to bear alone. The coffee shop on 42nd and Lexington was the kind of place that served Wall Street's morning ritual espresso. Pulled by baristas who spoke 3 languages and memorized orders for customers who controlled more money than some countries' GDP. Maya arrived first, choosing a table with clear sightlines to both entrances and the kitchen exit. Her phone showed 18 missed calls from Agent Walsh, but the secure message from Elena Santos was more important. Story live in 15 minutes. European authorities moving on Zurich accounts. U.S. Treasury freezing Meridian assets pending investigation. Marcus Thornfield entered at precisely 7:00 a.m., as if the appointment had been scheduled in his calendar for weeks. He looked exactly as Maya remembered from her night shift glimpses: silver hair, expensive suit that managed to suggest both authority and approachability, the kind of smile that had convinced investors to trust him with billions of dollars. He sat across from her without invitation. Maya Rodriguez, former NSA, former journalist, current pain in my ass, current witness to federal crimes, current possessor of stolen property. Thornfield placed a leather portfolio on the table. The USB drive Dr. Volkov gave you contains proprietary financial information taken without authorization from Zurich International Bank. That makes you an accessory to corporate espionage. It also contains evidence of human trafficking. It contains financial records that have been taken out of context and misinterpreted by a man facing embezzlement charges. Maya opened her laptop, turning the screen toward Thornfield. Are these shipping manifests out of context? Are the photographs of victims misinterpreted? Are the communications between buyers and handlers examples of creative accounting? Thornfield's expression didn't change, but Maya caught the micro-expression that crossed his face when he saw the images. Not surprise, recognition. Dr. Volkov has been more creative in his fabrications than we realized. The metadata on these files shows they were created over an 18-month period, accessed from multiple IP addresses, and contain embedded verification codes from banking systems in 3 countries. That's an impressive level of fabrication for someone who was supposedly focused on embezzling client funds. You've been busy. I've been thorough. It's what happens when you give someone with NSA training 3 years to observe your operations from the inside. Thornfield leaned back, his corporate mask finally slipping. What do you want? I want to know how many other companies are involved. I want names, locations, operational details. I want the complete network. And in exchange, when this story breaks in. Maya checked her phone. 8 minutes, I'll make sure the reporting includes the fact that Meridian's CEO cooperated with the investigation. You're assuming the story is going to break. It already has. Maya turned her laptop screen toward Thornfield again, this time showing live news feeds. The Guardian's headline read, "International Banking Conspiracy Exposed Trafficking Network Operated Through Major Financial Institutions." Below it, secondary stories from the New York Times, Le Monde, and Der Spiegel, all carrying variations of the same devastating revelations. Thornfield's phone began buzzing, then ringing, then buzzing again with what sounded like an endless stream of notifications. The European authorities are freezing assets, Maya continued. U.S. Treasury is launching an investigation. Your stock price is currently down 34% in pre-market trading and falling. You have no idea what you've done. I've exposed a criminal conspiracy that has been operating for nearly a decade. I've provided evidence that will save lives and bring justice to victims who have been treated as commodities. Thornfield stood, his composure finally cracking completely. You've destroyed thousands of jobs, destabilized 3 international banks, and created a financial crisis that will ripple across global markets. Good. The trafficking network you're so concerned about, it will reconstitute itself within 6 months under different names using different financial channels. But the banks you've targeted, they provide legitimate services to millions of customers who had nothing to do with these operations. Maya closed her laptop, her voice calm and steady. Then maybe those banks should have been more careful about who they did business with. Thornfield's phone rang again. This time he answered, walking away from the table but not lowering his voice enough to prevent Maya from hearing the conversation. No, I can't contain this. Yes, she has everything. The journalist contact's already activated. No, Walsh is compromised. She was supposed to prevent this. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air conditioning. Agent Walsh wasn't investigating the trafficking network. She was part of the cover-up. Her phone buzzed with a text from Volkov. Federal agents at coffee shop entrance, back exit compromised, moving to subway. Maya gathered her things and walked toward the kitchen where a confused barista pointed toward the service entrance when she explained in Spanish that she needed to leave quickly. In the alley behind the coffee shop, Maya's mind was already moving to the next phase. The story was public, the evidence was secure, but the network Thornfield had described would indeed reconstitute itself unless the exposure went deeper than just financial records. She needed the names of the buyers, the locations of the operations, the complete structure of a system that treated human beings as inventory. And she was beginning to understand that the only way to get that information would be to become bait. The abandoned warehouse in Queens smelled of rust and decades-old industrial chemicals. Maya had found it through a contact network that existed in the spaces between official channels, urban explorers, underground journalists, and people who specialized in providing sanctuary when official protection wasn't an option. Dr. Volkov sat on a folding chair laptop balanced on his knees, monitoring news coverage that was spreading across international media like wildfire. Zurich International's stock has been suspended from trading, he reported. Deutsche Handelbank is claiming they were unaware of the shell companies. 3 European governments are launching investigations. And the victims? No mention yet. The coverage is focused on the financial crimes. Maya wasn't surprised. Banking scandals sold newspapers and generated clicks. Human trafficking was more complex, more disturbing, harder to reduce to sound bites and stock ticker symbols. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Elena Santos. Documentary team in Geneva has footage of raids on 3 properties. Swiss authorities found evidence of 12 victims at one location, all minors. Dr. Volkov, the Swiss raids, did they hit any of the locations mentioned in your files? Yes, but those were just processing centers. Temporary housing before victims were moved to final destinations. Where are the final destinations? Volkov pulled up a map on his laptop marking locations across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Corporate facilities mostly, construction companies, agricultural operations, garment manufacturers, electronics assembly. Places where workers are isolated, where English proficiency isn't required, where disappearances can be explained as people simply moving on. Maya studied the map, cross-referencing with her mental database of Meridian's business relationships. This construction company in Phoenix Southwestern Development Partners Meridian provides financing for their projects. Yes, they specialize in large-scale residential developments in areas with minimal local oversight. And this electronics facility in Juarez, Maquiladora operation, Meridian handles their currency exchanges and trade financing. Maya realized the scope was even larger than she'd initially understood. This wasn't just a trafficking network using banks for money laundering. It was a comprehensive business model where financial institutions, construction companies, manufacturers, and logistics operators all participated in a system that treated human beings as resources to be acquired, transported, and deployed. Her primary phone rang. Agent Walsh again. Ms. Rodriguez, the situation has changed. We've arrested Marcus Thornfield and frozen Meridian's assets. You're no longer in danger. What about the trafficking operations? We're coordinating with international authorities to shut down the network. Your information has been invaluable. Maya looked at Volkov, who was shaking his head and mouthing the word no. Agent Walsh, which trafficking operation specifically? I'm not at liberty to discuss operational details, but I can assure you that we're taking comprehensive action. The construction site in Phoenix, the electronics facility in Juarez, the agricultural operations in Central Valley. Are those included in your comprehensive action? A pause. Ms. Rodriguez, where are you getting these specific locations? Maya ended the call. Walsh was fishing for information, not providing it. They're going to shut down the financial operations, she told Volkov, but leave the trafficking network intact. New banks, same business model, unless we expose the complete system, which requires evidence from the operational sites, not just financial records. Maya opened her laptop and began accessing databases she hadn't touched in 3 years. NSA training was like muscle memory. It came back quickly when needed. Dr. Volkov, how much do you know about Phoenix? Hot desert, good golf courses. Southwestern Development Partners has 6 active construction projects. Large-scale residential developments that require hundreds of workers. Workers who are housed on site, who work 6-day weeks, who are paid in cash and don't appear in official employment records. You're thinking of going there. I'm thinking of documenting what's actually happening there. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from a contact in Phoenix. Heard you were looking for work sites. Know a place hiring cleaners. Night shift. No questions asked. J. Dr. Volkov, the evidence you collected is financial. Numbers, transactions, communications between executives. But the real proof, the proof that will prevent this network from reconstituting itself, that's in the faces of the victims. You want to photograph them. I want to document their stories, their names, their origins. I want to create evidence that's harder to dismiss or explain away. Volkov was quiet for several minutes, studying the news coverage on his laptop. The Swiss raids found 12 victims. That's 12 people who are now free because of what we've done. And hundreds more who aren't. Maya, you're not responsible for saving everyone. She looked at him with an expression that was part exhaustion, part determination. Dr. Volkov, 3 years ago, I walked away from investigative journalism because I got too close to powerful people who didn't want their crimes exposed. I spent those 3 years cleaning toilets and pretending to be invisible while I watched those same crimes continue. And now you've exposed them. I've exposed the financial crimes, but the human trafficking will continue under different names, through different channels, with different faces in the boardrooms. Unless we document it so completely, so undeniably, that reconstitution becomes impossible. Her secure phone buzzed with another message from Elena Santos. Phoenix documentary team ready. Local law enforcement contacts established. When can you be there? Maya looked at Volkov, who was still staring at his laptop screen. Dr. Volkov, you've done your part. You risked everything to get this evidence to the right people. You don't need to. My daughter is studying medicine in Vienna, he said quietly. She wants to specialize in trauma treatment for refugees and trafficking victims. When she asks me what I did to make the world safer for people like them, I want to have a better answer than I stole some files and hoped someone else would fix things. Maya booked flights to Phoenix while Volkov arranged for additional financial records to be transferred to journalists in multiple countries. The warehouse in Queens would be abandoned by morning, but the work would continue. As they prepared to leave, Maya received one final message from an unknown number. You've made dangerous enemies, people with long memories and extensive resources. Watch your back. A friend. Dr. Volkov, she said, showing him the message. Are you sure about this? He closed his laptop and stood. I'm sure that sitting in European coffee shops while children are bought and sold is not an option I can live with. Maya looked around the warehouse one last time. 3 days ago, she had been a night janitor whose biggest concern was whether the coffee in the break room would be fresh. Now she was heading to Arizona to document evidence that could bring down an international trafficking network. The transformation was complete. She was no longer invisible, and that meant she was no longer safe. But safety, she realized, had always been an illusion anyway. The Phoenix construction site sprawled across 200 acres of desert, a maze of half-built houses and temporary structures that housed workers who lived in conditions that violated every labor law in Arizona. Maya arrived as part of a cleaning crew, her credentials established through a network of contacts who specialized in creating temporary identities for people who needed to disappear into plain sight. Dr. Volkov had remained in New York, coordinating with journalists and maintaining communication with Maya through encrypted channels. Elena Santos had positioned a documentary team in Phoenix, but they would remain at a distance until Maya gathered evidence that could be verified independently. The work camp was exactly what Maya had expected: men and women who spoke Spanish, Portuguese, various African dialects, and Eastern European languages, all living in barrack-style housing and working 12-hour shifts for wages that were paid in cash and amounted to less than minimum wage. But it was the children that confirmed her worst fears. They weren't supposed to be there. Child labor laws prohibited anyone under 18 from working construction sites. But there they were, carrying tools, mixing concrete, their presence explained as family members helping out during school holidays. Maya documented everything, photographs taken with a concealed camera, audio recordings of conversations between supervisors and workers, GPS coordinates of the housing facilities. But most importantly, she began collecting stories. ¿De dónde eres?" she asked a teenage girl during a break, switching to Spanish. "Honduras," the girl replied, then looked around nervously. "Pero no podemos hablar de eso." Maya didn't push immediately. Trust took time to build, especially among people who had been taught that curiosity led to punishment. Over 3 days, she learned names, origins, and stories that painted a picture of systematic exploitation. Workers from Central America who had been promised legitimate construction jobs but found themselves trapped in debt bondage. Eastern European women who had been told they would work as house cleaners but were forced into construction labor. African men who had paid smugglers for passage to America, but discovered the smugglers worked for the same people who now controlled their lives. But it was the conversation with a supervisor that provided the most damaging evidence. "These people," he said to Maya during a cigarette break, not realizing she spoke English as well as Spanish. "They're not like us. They're used to this kind of work, this kind of living. They're actually grateful to have jobs. What happens if they try to leave?" "Leave?" The supervisor laughed. "Where would they go? No papers, no money, no English. Besides, they owe money for transportation, housing, food. Takes years to pay off the debt." Maya recorded everything, including the supervisor's casual explanation of how workers who caused problems were transferred to other sites, how local authorities were paid to look the other way, how the paperwork was structured to make the workers appear to be independent contractors rather than employees. On the 4th day, her cover was blown. Maya was photographing a housing unit when she heard footsteps behind her. "You're not here to clean toilets." She turned to find a man in an expensive suit standing behind her. Clearly management, not construction crew. "I'm sorry. I said you're not here to clean toilets. You're here to document our operations. The question is, for whom?" Maya's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button that would alert Elena Santos's documentary team. "I don't know what you're talking about." Maya Rodriguez, former NSA, former journalist, current thorn in the side of several very important people. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice when someone with your skill set applied for a job at one of our facilities?" "My skill set is cleaning." "Your skill set is infiltration, documentation, and exposure, all of which make you exceptionally dangerous to our business model." Maya realized she was trapped. The housing unit was isolated from the main construction area, and the man's casual demeanor suggested he was confident she wouldn't be leaving. "The thing is," he continued, "we actually have a use for people with your background. The trafficking network you've been investigating, it's more complex than you realize. We don't just move workers, we move information, money, influence. People like you with your language skills and technical capabilities are valuable assets. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a choice. Work with us and your investigation ends here with you disappearing into our system. Refuse and your investigation ends here with you disappearing anyway, but less comfortably." Maya activated the panic button. "I'm going to choose option 3, she said, "which is the one where your entire operation gets exposed on international television in approximately 6 minutes. The man's confident expression faltered as Maya held up her phone, showing a live video feed that had been streaming to Elena Santos's secure server for the past 4 days. Every conversation, every photograph, every admission of criminal activity, it's all been recorded and transmitted in real time to journalists in 4 countries. "You're bluffing." Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Documentary going live now. Law enforcement en route. Hold position." Through the window of the housing unit, Maya could see federal vehicles entering the construction site, followed by news vans and the distinctive equipment trucks of television crews. Dr. Heinrich Volkov wasn't just a source, Maya said, still holding the phone steady. He was bait. We knew you would try to reconstitute the network, knew you would move operations to sites like this one. So we set a trap. By making yourself a target, by making myself irresistible. An investigative journalist with technical skills and access to classified methods. You couldn't resist trying to recruit me. The man reached for what Maya assumed was a weapon, but the door to the housing unit burst open before he could draw it. Federal agents' hands where we can see them. Maya realized she was looking at Agent Jennifer Walsh, but this time Walsh was wearing FBI tactical gear and pointing her weapon at the man in the suit instead of at Maya. Agent Walsh, Maya said carefully. I thought you were part of the cover-up. I was undercover investigating the network from inside. Your evidence helped us identify which federal employees were compromised and which were genuinely working the case. As the man in the suit was taken into custody, Maya walked outside to see the construction site swarming with federal agents, immigration officials, and medical personnel. Workers were being processed, photographed, interviewed. Some would be deported, but many would become witnesses in what was already being described as the largest human trafficking prosecution in U.S. history. Elena Santos appeared beside her camera crew in tow. How does it feel to bring down an international criminal conspiracy? Maya watched as workers no longer prisoners were given food, medical attention, and the first genuine choice many of them had experienced in years. Some were crying. Others stood in stunned silence. A few were making phone calls to family members they hadn't spoken to in months or years. It feels like a beginning, Maya said. 6 months later, Maya Rodriguez stood before a congressional committee, not as a witness, but as an expert consultant on financial crimes and human trafficking. The Meridian case had led to prosecutions in 12 countries, the rescue of over 400 victims, and the implementation of new banking regulations designed to prevent similar networks from operating. Dr. Heinrich Volkov had received immunity in exchange for his cooperation, and was now working with European authorities to trace additional financial networks. Marcus Thornfield was serving a 20-year sentence for conspiracy, money laundering, and human trafficking. But for Maya, the most important outcome was simpler. She was no longer invisible. Ms. Rodriguez, the committee chair said, based on your investigation and the resulting prosecutions, what recommendations would you make for preventing similar criminal networks from operating in the future? Maya looked at the assembled representatives, some of whom had probably never considered that the person who cleaned their offices might be the most qualified person in the building to answer questions about international financial crimes. The first recommendation, she said, is to understand that these networks succeed because they operate in the spaces where we don't look, among people we don't see, in systems we don't question. And the second, listen to the janitors, we see everything. In the audience, Maya spotted Elena Santos, who had won a Pulitzer Prize for her documentary series on the Trafficking network. Dr. Volkov sat beside her, having flown in from Vienna, where he had been lecturing at medical conferences about the intersection of financial crimes and human rights. After the hearing, Maya walked outside into Washington sunshine that felt different than it had 6 months earlier. She had offers from 3 news organizations, 2 think tanks, and the Department of Justice. But first, she was going back to New York. There was a bookstore in Queens that was hiring someone to manage their community outreach program. Someone who spoke multiple languages, understood diverse communities, and knew how to see the invisible. It wouldn't pay as much as the consulting offers or the government positions, but it would let her sleep at night. And after 3 years of cleaning up other people's messes, Maya Rodriguez was ready to help people build something clean. The story ends not with Maya disappearing back into invisibility, but with her choosing visibility on her own terms. She had learned that true power wasn't in being seen by those who mattered, but in seeing those who had been forgotten and ensuring they would never be invisible again. The trafficking network was broken, the financial crimes exposed, the victims rescued. But more importantly, the system that had allowed these crimes to flourish had been forced to confront its own blindness. Maya Rodriguez, former NSA contractor, former investigative journalist, Former night janitor and now full-time advocate for the unseen had proven that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone assumes doesn't matter. And in a world where power often depended on keeping certain people invisible, that was a lesson worth learning.